Ik vind dat we de mens centraal moeten stellen om juist het geluid vanuit de samenleving te laten horen.
Om te laten zien dat we solidair met elkaar zijn en dat we één vuist maken voor een inclusieve samenleving met alle groepen.
Er zoveel mensen hier en samen met ons discriminatie, racisme tegen willen gaan.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And instead of staying at home watching TV, but you are here joining us tonight. So thank you so much. Also, thank you for the ones who are watching at their homes via Salto TV. Thank you for being with us tonight. So welcome, welcome. Hope you will all have a good evening of listening as well as a discussion tonight. So my name is Myra Collis and I will be the moderator for today. And with me in front of you are Louis, Cesar, Taguba, and Salman Sana. I will be introducing them one by one. So, but before that, the theme, as you have seen on the event page, is all about recognizing and integrating indigenous knowledge, right? With the main question, how can the recognition and the integration of indigenous knowledge or perspective strengthen today's diversity, equity, and inclusivity or DEI initiatives in making a more inclusive and equitable society. So basically that's our main discussion questions. So yeah, I'm Myra Collis, and as I've said, this is our, I'm sorry if the text is a bit small, but we have like 4 screens, so you can see which one works for you, yeah? So, yeah. So yeah, this one too is too small, but basically this is what we're gonna hope to accomplish by the end of this hour. So we will have 3 sub-questions to discuss or answer the main questions that we have. We will go through this one by one, and in the middle we will have an intermission. Yeah. So yeah, before we go on, I would like to introduce to you Louis, sorry. Where's my... Yeah. Louis is the Diversity Officer HR at Vrije University at the VU, and she has a background in recruiting and currently dedicated to building a diverse workforce and fostering an inclusive staff policy at VU. And this involves innovative recruitment strategies to identify talent at entry and creating a welcoming workplace environment for all employees. And Louis. She is responsible for promoting awareness in various ways to recognize and acknowledge qualities, ensuring that all talents thrive at VU Amsterdam. And also in her free time, she is helping grow volunteer-led Jobs for Humanity. Anyone knows Jobs for Humanity? So she does that by connecting underrepresented talent with welcoming employees and providing ongoing support for the communities they serve. So welcome, Louis, and thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes. And next to me is Salman Sana. And Salman Sana has dedicated 15 impactful years to cultivating inclusive, collaborative environments and nurturing leadership development. And he serves in multiple roles, including as a TEDx Amsterdam licensee and board member. He's also a speaker and consultant to various organizations. In his consulting work, he focuses on cultivating thriving cultures, developing personal leadership, and fostering unity among diverse teams. That's a lot of work. And his speaking engagements center around changing company culture and driving action for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, overcoming obstacles through transforming frustrations. That's heavy. And beyond his professional pursuits, you'll frequently find him cycling through the streets of Amsterdam with his daughter and exploring the world, writing and staying physically active through CrossFit and kickboxing. So welcome, Salman, and thank you for being with us tonight.
You know everything.
And last but not the least, we have Cesar. Cesar Tomilas Taguba is an indigenous Igorot from the Philippine Cordillera and serves as a representative of the Cordillera People's Alliance, or CPA, elder in Europe. He arrived in the Netherlands in the 1980s as a political refugee and has since settled in Amersfoort. Throughout his time in the Netherlands, he has steadfastly advocated for indigenous rights and culture. And as a co-founder of Mabika's Foundation, the Netherlands, which I'm really, really grateful for, and in partnership with other diaspora, he works tirelessly to promote and preserve indigenous culture, ensuring that indigenous knowledge is passed on to future generations. Thank you so much, Cesar, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. Yeah. Yeah, and so that goes our three speakers, which whom we're gonna discuss the questions with. And as I've said, my name is Maran. I'm also founder of Mabika's Foundation, your host for tonight in cooperation with organizers of the Week Against Racism. And this event tonight is part of the Week Against Racism that started March 18 until 23rd of next week. So welcome once again. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So before we dive into that, so in the beginning I said recognizing and including indigenous knowledge. When I asked the speakers of tonight to come join me, of course the first question we have in our mind is, what is indigenous knowledge? Who has the same question? Yes, right? And who are the indigenous people, right? That's like the common question. So what do we mean indigenous knowledge? So dive in quickly. When we talk about, sorry, this is so small, but when we talk about indigenous knowledge, this is basically referring to cover all the local, the traditional, you can see the non-Western beliefs, the practices, the customs, and the values, as well as the alternative, the informal forms of knowledge. So as we can see, when we talk about knowledge, there are three types. So knowledge that factual, we refer to them as the knowledge, the factual knowledge. There are also the practical knowledge that we just learn without going to university or so, we just know them. And also those knowledge of persons, places, or things that by acquaintance we get to know them. So these are different types of knowledge wherein overall you combine them together as not only the knowledge you find in the books or the facts, but also the values, the perspectives, the beliefs, as you can see in the definition. So in our discussion tonight, we are referring to this type of indigenous knowledge. And why do we emphasize on indigenous knowledge? Is because we wanted to claim what is due for the indigenous people. And when we talk about indigenous people, who are they exactly? When we talk about societies, there are two types, right? We can say the collectivist society and the individualist society. So when we talk about collectivist society, these are the societies where perspectives differ from us. And for us here in the Western culture, we are more individualist in nature. So as you can see here, there's a difference between a collectivism and individualism-driven society. So for the indigenous communities, mostly in the countries in East Asia, Latin America, indigenous communities, they are all the individuals, these are the people we call indigenous people, collectivist society, but the difference with us here in the Western world is that our perspective. For collectivist society, we view individuals are the ones responsible for the well-being of the community, as opposed to individualist or Western societies. We view individuals are responsible for themselves. That's why I like this, every man for himself. Okay, that is an individualist society. Mind your own business. And for this nail that sticks out, that one, that is for the collectivist society. So later we will discuss more about this, but at least you kind of have an idea the context of what indigenous knowledge mean, as well as who are the indigenous people who possess this kind of knowledge. So moving on, when we look at the past, the indigenous communities have faced the long-standing systemic injustices, which are vividly demonstrated by instances of exploitation and marginalization, like the example of the ones that we would like to highlight tonight, the case of the human zoos. And this troubling past has deeply influenced cultural narratives and shaping how society perceives indigenous people through stories, cultural upbringing, and educational systems. So for instance, the misrepresentations in European textbooks have led to misunderstandings about indigenous communities and undervalued the contributions of their knowledge in today's world. So as I've explained what indigenous knowledge is and who are the indigenous people, we would like to dive further on examples of what you called historical wrongs that led to the prejudice, marginalization, and why we kind of like forget the indigenous people and communities nowadays. So as I've said, I'm happy that I have Cesar tonight because he's more knowledgeable and could share to us the case about the human zoos. And I have here a picture. This is a picture of human zoo in the St. Louis World Fair in the U.S. in 1900s. Cesar, would you like to tell more about the case of the human zoos? And
yes, but may I add some small data?
Sure.
When you talk of indigenous peoples, internationally or globally, there are 370 million indigenous peoples in 90 countries in all regions of the world, 5% of the total world population, and 15% of the world's poor. In the Philippines, there are 14 to 17 million indigenous people in a population of 100 million, belonging to 110 ethno-linguistic groups. 33% of the Cordillera region is in the northern region where I come from. And collectively, the people are called Igorots of the Cordillera region. Now, the issue of human zoo is a part of our colonial history. But let me first touch the question of our colonial history and its impact on the indigenous people in the Philippines, particularly for us in the northern part of the Philippines. Now, with the coming of the Spaniards in 1521, they imposed the concept of the regalian concept. And this regalian concept says that all natural resources belongs to the state, and private ownership of land emanates from the state. And this concept already automatically made the indigenous people squatters in their own land. Our people have our own concept of land ownership, as well as relationship with nature, but with this Regalian doctrine, that power for them to determine their own political institutions as well as livelihood, and more importantly, ownership of tribal or ancestral land was removed from them. This is what we call a situation of making the indigenous people squatters in their own land. And this Regalian doctrine had been enshrined or had been carried over by our colonizers like the United States and present government now. And one example of it is there's such a thing as Republic Act Mining Act of 1995, which designates opening up of mining of copper, nickels, and other resources located in the ancestral lands of tribal people. And very recently, there is now a debate in Philippine Congress about opening up the whole country for foreign corporations, 100% opening up the country for foreign corporations to come in even to have control, or 100% in, let's say, 100% they're open to introduce and to take charge of institutional, educational institutions, which we all know that as an instrument of a colonial ruler, such institutions become an instrument of alienating our people from our own culture. Now, with that in mind, I continue to the issue of human zoos by colonial rulers, mostly Western. Human zoos is a practice wherein people like Igorots, Moros, and indigenous people of colonies of Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, France, United Nations were displayed in human zoos. It is too disturbing to see our Igorot communities in the United States as well as in Spain and other countries in Europe being displayed. And the image is to tell that these people are savages. They are uncivilized. Therefore, it justifies colonialism and also the introduction of Christianity to make Christians out of them, to root them out from their pagan backgrounds and all of that. As I said, these human zoos were used to justify the long period of colonization which happened in the Philippines. Now, from the period of 1521 for the Spanish colonization, and they were wanting to have access to the gold mining industry for our people, but our people, the tribe that I belong to, and other tribes in the Cordillera, resisted to fighting back the colonial power. The same happened also with the Americans when they came in. There was resistance on our part, but the Americans were wiser. You know, they opened up educational system. They brought in Christianity apart from the hated Catholic religion because of its relationship with Spain and all of that. So this became all instruments to draw us up away from our culture, to uproot us from our societies and all of that. I would say I am a number one exhibit of such cultural alienation and all of that. No, my mother belongs to a cultural group. It's called the Ibaloy. My father belongs to another cultural group, the Yugad. They were teachers, and I could remember they were in their lesson plan. They were teaching more about America, than about the people. And so we say, wow, with the almost 300 years of Spanish colonialization and 40 years of American colonialization, we are more acquainted with the culture of the convent and the culture of Hollywood.
Yes. And so the picture that you actually see behind us is a picture of the Igorot Cordilleras, the region where I and Cesar came from. So they are probably our ancestors. So they are displayed in St. Louis in the US, just for entertainment. Also, like what Cesar said, to present these indigenous people as savages and not intellectuals who are capable of running their own communities in life. So that, as you can see from 1900s, that narrative is passed down from generation to generation, especially in the West, where our textbooks, the things that we learn, this is the picture that we have about indigenous people. So imagine, like, up to this time, when you talk about indigenous people, you can think of these images until now. So that goes with the discrimination, marginalization, thinking that you are not intellectual and you cannot stand up for yourself. That brings us to the next question of, which is part of this case, is like the origin of systemic justice, because it's historically rooted. The marginalization is historically rooted since 1900. So what happens now in our systems when it comes to education, as what you have been talking about. So now we can dig upon what makes systemic injustice systemic, or, like, for example, what does it mean for injustice to be systemic in the first place? So I think we would like to invite Salman and Luwayne, if you have some insights about this. Like, what does it mean for injustices to be systemic? Or how have historical wrongs, such as the case of the humans who's contributed to the establishment and perpetuation of systemic injustices that we see nowadays, which also the theme of this week, racism, right?
You go first?
You want to go first?
Ladies.
Ladies first. Yeah, how come it becomes systemic? From my perspective, if I hear this, I've been hearing this with an awe, that this happened actually in history. So I wasn't really aware that these pictures were from your, ancestors. I see it as no incidents, right? If it's systemic, you can't call it incidents anymore. It's in the system, it's in the processes. It's that makes it possible that this still occurs, right?
It's like a locked-in system, right? Because we are locked in here since it's historically rooted, like we grow up here. This is what we know. This is how we grew up. So, go on.
And I think, I find it a little bit hard, to answer this question, to be honest. So I know that you have some more, maybe.
Well, the thing is that we just had dinner before, just downstairs with a group of us, and we're talking about if we talk about the systemization of these kind of injustices that have taken place. A lot of it we don't even see, we don't hear, we don't even experience. If we look at our school system, if we look at the way we've been educated, everything is so ingrained, so implicit, and as I see it, like, there's many steps that we need to take before we can actually find some form of reconciliation, because at first we need to be able to accept the fact that things like this happened. And that's a harsh truth to realize, that if you would say this is your ancestors that experienced this, then you have to think of everyone else here. You have to look back at your ancestors and what they were responsible of. That might start to trickle upwards to a certain truth that might not be easy to accept and acknowledge. And I think that's one of the first steps that we need to take, just to realize that it happened, not to feel guilty about it, not to be ashamed about it, or none of that, or from whichever side of the pendulum that you're swinging from. And I feel that's, if we get to look at a system where we're talking about, we were talking about the university system, because that's where you're from, and we said, okay, how's the university system built, or how's the educational system built? If you go to high school, what are the subjects you need to follow? Mm-hmm. Which are, there's physics, chemistry, biology, geography, history, and all that.
Languages,
but there's nothing about how to be with the community, how to, you know, those are more indigenous wisdoms that you get. And then when you're much older, in your 30s and 40s, and then you start to go on a spiritual journey for yourself, and then you're in these communities, and you're like, oh my God, yes, this is what we should have all the time. Yeah, but that's something that indigenous knowledge and experience, you know, that's been there the whole time. We just removed it out of this system because of, well, again, different beliefs, which no right or wrong, but this is where we are right now. And I think that's where the systemization is one that, again, is implicit, but we first need to take a step back and realize, what is it? And am I able to see it in the first place? I mean, there's a few steps we can take there, which is addressing the root causes, repairing the harm that's been done, because there's been, excuse my French, a shit ton of harm done. There's building trust again with those indigenous communities, because the trust has been broken over and over and over again. It's like, oh, you know, either when it comes to land or when it comes to any other there's been a lot of trust broken, and that needs to be rebuilt. Sorry, I can make a go on this. It's also about educating future generations. Everyone here, you are apparently here for a particular reason, because this topic speaks to you in some shape or form. You want to learn more about it, that you want to know about it. To be honest with you, I don't consider myself the most learned person about this. I'm just a very curious person. And I think we all are if we're here in this room. So, okay, let's learn more about it, and how do we empower marginalized communities? This is where I feel like we shift the needle just a slight bit, and who knows, maybe in the generations after this, and you were just talking about my daughter that I take on the bike. Yeah, she is, I hope to a certain extent that she's going to be part of communities that she goes like, oh wow, we're not only individualistic, but we're more collective as well.
Yes.
Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Salman. And as we continue to think about this question, we could also start reflecting on what are the examples of contemporary injustices that we see today that could have rooted from historical wrongs, like the ones done for indigenous people. Not only for the indigenous people, but also for Black people, colored people, you know, all the people that are very unique and special in the society. For some reason, they are being marginalized. But we will continue the discussion as we move on. And so, yeah, this would be the question for, something to reflect on. And then the next question that we would like to tackle before we'll have the break is the discussion point number 2. So if these are the injustices that we see, if these are examples of historical wrongs that we see, now what role do indigenous knowledge play in fostering understanding and advocating for communal interests, especially as we look at the present, the failure to recognize and integrate indigenous knowledge within the European societies, they perpetuate racial biases, and they foster cultural unfamiliarity. We're not familiar of cultures of indigenous people. We're not familiar with the ways of the LGBT community or the Black people and the other marginalized group. But the oversight in mainstream media representation, where indigenous voices are often marginalized or omitted altogether, hinders the broader public's understanding. And I'm really happy that we have this platform to kind of like discuss and open discussion, and hopefully we also hear from you by the end of the hour. And so this exclusion not only obstruct fostering of intercultural understanding, but also contributes to systemic biases when it comes to decision-making. The decision-making processes across various sectors, whether it's government, policies, to education, to corporate practices, or even in our own homes. Yeah. So this time we'd like to look at the role that indigenous knowledge play in fostering understanding. And when we talk about that, what are these indigenous knowledge systems in the first place? We are talking about philosophies. We are talking about values. What are these indigenous values? So there are many, but we just would like to highlight 3 of them. First one is the connection, our interconnectedness. So of course, for indigenous collectivist society, we always believe that we are interconnected with one another. Like I'm connected with you, even if you come from another country, and I'm connected with you, even if you're Westerner and I'm not. And we have this participatory engagement Meaning to say, we have this collaborative approach to things. So like what I've said earlier, we look after the interests of the community as opposed to looking only after ourselves. And reciprocity is giving back. Oh, by the way, that is a picture from our hometown, that reciprocity, you know, the community, during the pandemic, the community gather together what they have at home, and then they place it in one place for people to take it for free. So if you have anything you would like to give during the pandemic, put it at that place, and you can get bread, stick broom, eggs, you know, and that's how they kind of support one another. That was during the pandemic. And also in the middle, community engagement. This is also from our region when we have this feast, and everyone, even though I didn't assign a task for you, automatically they know, oh, I will be there to wash the dishes, I will be there to peel the potatoes, and I will be there to distribute the food. So automatically you have that value of like, okay, I'm here, I'm part of the community, so I'm gonna do something. So that is kind of like the philosophies we have. In summary, this is a difference. Thank you, Max, for this slide, because you can see here the difference between the, let's say, colonial perspective or indigenous perspective, the modern/colonial perspective and Western perspective versus indigenous non-Western perspective. So as you can see, first one is for indigenous communities, everything is alive, including the rivers, the stones, the mountains. We don't believe that here, right? It's only human beings that are alive. Matter is dead. And also in indigenous community, everything is relational. As I've said, we are connected with one another. The environment is connected to us. That's why we see the river, the mountains as also part of ourselves. You destroy them, you destroy yourself. You enrich them, then you enrich yourself. So for the Western modern colonial perspective, we see the environment as something that we can control and that we are the masters of the environment. So we do whatever we wanted to do with them. So that goes with the materialistic and profit-oriented mindset that we have here. So it's all about advancement, it's all about accumulation, it's all about wealth and progress of civilization, as opposed to the indigenous ways of looking at things. We look at the harmony or the giving back. Yeah, survival of the fittest. Nature is dangerous according to the colonial perspective, whereas in the indigenous world, we always see nature are the Mother Earth that provides everything we need as long as we give back. Unlike here, we just take and take, right? Whatever we want. It just reminded me of what my elders used to tell me when I was a kid. When you go uproot a tree, make sure that you plant 2 more trees, because you get something from Mother Earth, then you should give back something. So everything will be enough for everyone. And those are the kind of very simple values that probably nowadays we're starting to forget, or we don't even talk about them anymore, right? So these are just examples of the differences between these worlds that we are talking about. So, okay. So if this is the examples of indigenous philosophies, maybe you're already actually familiar with it. As you hear it, you already know, oh yeah, I know that. But then what does that mean when it comes to today's work, you know, in the modern world, where we are now in the Western world? Is it relevant in our professional practice? So I throw out this question to you, like, are these indigenous principles familiar to you? Or are they integrated in your professional workplace? If not, why do you think is that the case? Yeah?
I just had a real quick anecdote when I saw that picture of you sharing food and everything that you had.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of all the toilet paper that was finished that we had. I was like, exact opposite.
Oh yeah, we ran out of toilet papers here, right? During the pandemic. Yeah.
A mystery why that became a thing. But anyways. But next to that, I think just to build on that, I was to a couple of people that know it. I just showed the song Colors of the Wind from Pocahontas. Of course, there's a bit of debate about the source, but I think the sentences that she starts with, that she says, you think we're ignorant savages, and then she continues to say that, is a savage one is me or is it you, for those that are claiming the land and just acting to claim the land. And I think when it comes to, again, it's a Disney movie, so you have to take it with a grain of salt, but I do believe there's truth in it, which is how do we look at this kind of holistic worldview that Indigenous peoples have towards the respect for diversity. It's already there. We're like, oh, we have to become more diverse and inclusive and all that. Yeah, but that's not a thing. That's not even a matter when it comes to many communities. And that's what surprises me, that suddenly we have to learn this. Like kids, babies, they don't know the difference between color or, they just see other happy baby, they hug, they kiss, it's all okay. But then the older we get, we're educated into a certain way of looking and treating people in a different way. That's on us. But I feel this kind of stewardship for the land and treating the land. I mean, I live in Amsterdam, and there's a place in the west of Amsterdam called Fruittuin van West, which is this really nice place where they make they produce their own biological and organic vegetables there. I take my daughter there just so that she can experience how it is to be a part of land where you just grow food, and she can literally pluck something off the trees there, which is natural and grown, because that's nowhere to be found here. And I feel like that's something that Indigenous wisdoms already have within them. That's not your innate, like you said, you take something from the tree, you plant two more so that it's sustainable. Right now, we just go to Albert Heijn and we just fill our baskets up and we take it home. No idea where it came from. Some farm, it just says Spain probably on it, and we think, okay, sure. And that's not our fault. It's just the kind of the commercial capitalistic system that we live in. Big philosophical conversation there. But it is good to be aware of, okay, how do I step into this world? Yeah, just
Thanks, Salman. Do you have anything, Loué? Like, do you recognize these philosophies?
Yeah, if I look at my background, I'm not coming from the Indigenous community at all, but I do have like ethnic roots. My parents, they come from China, so I do feel familiarity with the collectivism. You know, it's all together. I always speak in we if I talk about my family. It's not like my mother and I. It's all about we. So I do see some familiarity with that part. But it also brings me back with, when I'm sick, when I grew up at home, when I'm sick, my mother always used to make those kind of like potions, I call them, to make me better. And they use a lot of
herbs,
from the nature. And she always, she's kind of like not allowed to do that, but she brings them back from China. But I think most of those herbs, you can also buy them here, by the way. But still, I'm 40 years old now, and still she always asks, like, hey, how are you doing? Have you eaten already? It's really important for her to know that my health is going well. But it really brings me back, like, hey, all those potions, to make me better. She has this kind of like a knowledge from the nature. And that's not something I grew up when I was born and raised in the Netherlands. So I do see some familiarity with those aspects.
So how about also at VU? Do you see any of these philosophies, like giving back? Is it also something you see at the workplace you have? Like the community engagement?
Well, not really in my work as a D&I professional, because the VU, it's situated here in Amsterdam. It's all more about the individual, but we are a VU community, right? So it's important that we share the knowledge with each other, of course. Also engaging with the community, with the students, with the teachers, with all the professionals at the VU. But not like really on this aspect in that case.
Exactly the point, yeah. We talk about this. We have this platform to talk about Indigenous knowledge because we were talking about this earlier and we said, this is kind of new. to us. They said it's like kind of new in the sense that we don't really talk about this in universities or in schools. We were talking about when I was in university, also at the VU, we don't have a subject called Indigenous Studies, but the studies conducted on Indigenous people are under the course anthropology or community development, but there's no mention of Indigenous studies. So that's how we are eradicated in the first place on the picture. Yeah, so we are not on the picture. So how can we integrate us on the picture if we don't even have a platform for us, or you don't have a space for us? So I'm happy that we have this space now to talk about this thing. Yeah? Do you have something to add, Cesar?
Yeah. Oh, just one more point about this human zoo. I'm happy to say that the indigenous people themselves are taking the initiative to call for rectification of this historical event. Here in Europe, we have an Europe-wide organization of Cordillera Igorot people. And in one of our meetings in Barcelona, a resolution was passed that there should be a commemorative event to put a closure to this very shameful and disgusting history of human zoo. And it was fully approved by the participants of this Europe Conference of Cordillera Igorot people. We come from different tribes, we come from different religions, we come from different areas of work, but most of us are migrants here in Europe. And it's so encouraging to note that in the process of learning history and all of that, no less than our Igorot migrants in Europe have taken the cudgel to call for a commemoration of this and to put a closure to this human zoo. And we are happy that the resolution reached the University of Barcelona, and they would like to pick up this whole question of human zoo and to consider the resolution of this Igorot European Conference in terms of putting a closure, reparations if necessary, and moving on together for a better society. Now, when it comes to indigenous knowledge, definitely there are indigenous knowledge, but there's the continuing danger of it being appropriated.
Yeah.
My wife had been, I am to say, excuse me, my partner had been involved in the process of identifying herbal plants in the Cordillera. And they found out that so many Cordillera plants, and some of them also found in China, which are being used, could be used. And with the use of appropriate technology, they tried to make pills out of these herbal plants. A technology appropriate to the level of their production. But what is happening now is corporations, pharmaceuticals are coming in to have what they call, there's a term, to have what we call license?
Patent.
License.
Patent over these indigenous plants. And definitely such knowledge will be taken out from our people, and then we'll be asked to pay back a higher amount of the herbal plants that came from our ancestral lands, all because it is appropriated for commercial and profit purposes.
Yeah, exactly. And that also reminds me how they, the indigenous communities, starting with those traditional medicines, we have names for every medicines in the field, right? And we have it in our own local language. But when these, let's say, colonizers came and then learned, oh, this is used for this is a medicine for that, they started naming all those plants that are traditional plants, giving them scientific names, and in the end it's no longer a property of or associated as something with the indigenous, but something with the Western, because they are named after scientific names, put in books, and that's what we study at school. Now the rest is history. But yeah, thank you for sharing with that, and the one that you mentioned about the thing that is going on now, that reparation, trying to correct the wrong of the past, that entails an initiative from the group itself, right? So that's very important to note, that taking the initiative to do something is really important. And that's why I'm very thankful for you all here, because you have the initiative to come, okay, what are they going to talk about? So you come here and listen to what is it about, but also you made the decision to be here today. And that's why I would like to emphasize also the importance of decision making, whether in a personal level, government level, in a workplace, a European level. So what is the importance of decision making? I mean, why is it so important when it comes to addressing the issues of discrimination and inequality? How does decision-making influences societal norms? This is the question I would like to throw to you, because indeed it's all about decision-making. Yeah? When we combat this racism, when we try to combat marginalization, it all depends what happens in the decision-making processes. So if you have any input on why is this important and how does it work with the decision making, please feel free to share.
Yeah, for me, it's more like literally, if you're part of the decision making process, you literally have a seat at the table. You know, there are the decisions being made, you're being included. You can think along what wrongdoing has been done to you or your family or your ancestors, etc. That means that you can also shape and influence and give your perspectives on what kind of changes has to be made on the policies which are currently in place. Maybe those have to be adjusted, but also with it gives you kind of like a power to also have influence on maybe like the money streams, the resources, etc. So that can have effect, on maybe make sure that the injustice and the wrongdoing that will stop. That's my take on it. Maybe.
Yeah, there's two quotes. There was one that I think maybe has been shared quite often. It's by Verna Myers, and she says, "Diversity is going to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance." Mm-hmm. And I like that one, although I find there's still something a little bit, off, that somebody has to be asked to dance, right? So I heard a derivative of that by Daniel Jude, and he said, diversity is going to the party, and inclusion is being a part of the party planning committee. I like that one more, because it actually goes exactly off the back of what you just said, which is, what we, I think, need to find to do, especially anybody here in a position of power, because often it's power and structure, which is why particular voices can or cannot be heard. Bless you. I find we need to center particular voices or give voices to what do you think? What do you think is needed? How do you think we should go about this? That's the conversations that we should be having. And also, of course, we talked about recognizing historical injustices, but I think it's also about supporting Indigenous-led initiatives. And the more we hear about it, as we're hearing about it today, saying, okay, great, how can I be of support? There's an initiative that I'm supporting, which is called Resistance. It's working with Indigenous people in the Amazon, trying to protect areas of the Amazon, which literally, by the way, are and this is not just this is not metaphor, but literally are the lungs of the earth. All the toxins that are coming from the northern side of the world, they literally are purifying that, and it's just getting smaller and smaller. So they're trying to support. We're supporting this group of people, the forest forces, as they're called, to help protect this region, and it's the Indigenous people that are doing that with their technology and with their chiefs. I say that as an example because I feel like that's what we can do. That's where, when it comes to decision making, and they're trying to work with the legal system there as well in Brazil to see if there's a collaboration between the Indigenous people and the legal system. So working with lawyers to make sure that actual laws and are passed to be able to protect a part of the earth that we all actually need. So it's quite interesting how that all works, but I think it's more about the partnering and the supporting of initiatives. So you might hear them here, you might hear them during the week, but that's something that I feel like I can do a lot more because I don't feel like I'm doing enough. So I don't know, I sit here more like there's so much more I can do, and I know I can, and I hope that I can continue to. Yeah.
Yes. Indeed, partnership and collaboration and support. And we will move to that later as we discuss also the trendy nowadays in workplaces, that is the diversity, equity, inclusion. All departments are or all companies are starting to have departments on DEI, but what does that mean exactly? So we will have that discussion after an intermission number. So I would like to welcome my fellow Mabikas constituents, Mercedes Diwalan. She is a singer and a musician. She's gonna render Indigenous song with her guitar, and to be accompanied by June Abaya with some dance steps, which you can follow because we would like to invite you later by the end of this hour to dance with us to end the session. So look at June and how she dances, so later we will all dance together. So please welcome Mercedes and June.
Although you don't understand it, but we just want to share, and we want to show you some of our songs and dance from our place.
Bear with me, I have two left legs.
Like that.
Suyo soy nandagam mangisimpais na namnam shamat lang abastida no maya maya at si dengdengam omisem kay gayam taadim na namnaman problemas kasusumsum ipatayaw na sandagam iyak pa'y kan-kansyon maililakis na lubong ipugaw maniibaw namnamdas mahululaw gayam ko bumangon ka tangadang payadayasi kabunyan di makaway basta din bilin na sagan musuway gayam ko di ka mahupay di grande sumangbay si kabunyan di makaway basta rin bilin na sagan masuway dong dong ay si dong ilay insinali dumay dong dong ay si dong ilay insinali dumay.
Thank you so much, Mercedes and June. So the dance is an Igorot dance, and each step of the dance that June performed actually has a meaning, right? So later we will also do the same. So when you raise your hands like that, it means reverence to the heavens, and when you look at down, reverence to the earth. So it's all about our connection with the earth as well as our connection with one another. So we will have more of that. Thank you, Mercedes and June. Oh. Okay. Do you want to stretch? Yes, okay. Or maybe we can do that a little bit. We have 2 minutes before we begin. So, June and Mercedes, maybe we just show them some steps before we go to the...
3 steps. Just 3 steps.
Yeah, okay. So do we have to stand up? Yeah.
Oh.
Yay!
Actually, this is a movement for the feet and the hand, right? So first is the hand. Yes, okay. 2. And the feet, yeah. 4. Okay, good. And then this is like, yeah. And when you raise your hand, your head towards the hand, because Indigenous people are also more into resilience and strength, so you have to also hold your head up high. Yeah. So these steps are more like the emulation or following the eagles, yeah, the movement of the birds, because this symbolizes freedom. Yeah. Yeah, and then back. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay, and later we will do a circular movement. Yeah, thank you.
That's nice.
Yeah. So later with music. Okay, so as we move on, thank you once again. Can I just, yeah? Yeah, so to end the discussion on recognizing and including Indigenous knowledge, let's touch upon the question of how can we integrate Indigenous perspectives to strengthen today's diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI initiatives for the purpose of what do you call that? Rebuilding a more inclusive and equitable system. So we can talk about understanding what is DEI exactly, and can we identify some transferable Indigenous knowledge or perspective, and what are the challenges and opportunities that we could dive into. Yeah, so as a DEI officer, as diversity officer at VU, maybe I would throw the first question to Lu Wei. Like, what does DEI exactly mean? Yeah. Lu Wei.
So the DEI.
Louis.
Anyways, so diversity, DEI, it stands for the D for diversity, of course, E for equity, and I for inclusion. So what does diversity mean? Yeah, it's actually about mutual differences. If you look at inclusion, it's actually everyone in a group which feels valued, respected, and involved, despite of their differences. And equity is more about that everyone has kind of like access to the same opportunities. But it also kind of refers to also like the power, you know, differences of people. When people are born, you know, not everyone starts at the same level. So actually you also look at the person like, hey, what's actually needed? Because there are certain barriers people experience in their lives. So let's say, I don't know if you know the picture when 3 kids are standing behind a wall. And if you actually, what equality means is that you give everyone the same box to stand on, so they can watch over the barrier, the wall, right? What equity actually means is like the 3 kids standing behind the wall, they have like different heights. So you look at what every person actually needs. So if you translate that to the workplace, it's like saying you're giving everyone the same devices, you know, to do your work. But actually, if you're not well sighted, you might need a different type of computer to do your work. So equity is something which I find really important to look at this topic as well, to look at what everyone needs in order to have the same opportunities in life. And that's something you also look in your work field, like, hey, what's actually being recognized and respected, and does everyone have the same opportunities for promotions or not? Do we value the same aspects and differences, what we see in people? So yeah, that's what I can tell you about diversity, equity, inclusion.
You have something to add, Salman?
Yeah, I was just thinking about where to start. Well, I had to, actually, I'll make it very personal. Well, very personal. If I think about myself, my parents, they didn't go to university here. They didn't have a network. They don't have a family house in France somewhere. They didn't go camping, didn't even know what that was, or at least they didn't really put that into practice. So there was a lot of things that when I was going to even university here that I was just like, a lot of it was new because I didn't recognize it. Now I say that, I mean, I feel very privileged in where I am at this moment right now in my life. There's a lot of privileges that I have and I feel very grateful. So I'm not going to discard any of that. But I do realize that while I was going through a particular system, that there was others that had just so much more recognition and they understood it more and they had a network and they had people and the whole student association thing was a very big blur for me, and I didn't understand why I had to go through a grueling 2 weeks to be able to be humiliated, to be able to be a part of a group. But apparently that's just a part of a culture. And I'm not saying that it's a good or a bad thing, it's just that there's others that have no idea, they do not have access to those networks. So later on when you get into your professional career, why is it so hard to get a job and why is it hard to get into certain particular places and networks? It's because, well, that's not something that I was given. I use that as an example more personally because I started to realize more and more, that's where equity comes involved, which is some people, and I can say honestly, gave me a chance. Say if some people saw something in me at a certain point, said, hey, I think you'd be good at this. And I say, oh, really? Okay, that's great. And then when I'm given that chance and I enter into particular networks, I'm like, oh, so this is where you guys have been hanging out because I have no idea that this existed. And I think what we can do is see if we can recognize that. What I try to do is see if I can recognize that. So how I see diversity, equity, and inclusion, and when it put into workplace, it's a buzzword. We read about it all the time. There's people working on it. Sometimes it's used as a kind of I'm not sure if you have whitewashing, greenwashing. I'm not sure what this would be, different kind of washing. But I would hope that there's a sincerity there, that we're actually saying, what is it? What am I really doing about this topic? And do I really find it important? Am I actually willing to look at my own biases, for example, big topic, unconscious bias, because they're unconscious, so you don't really know them. I've done, there's an implicit bias test by Harvard. You can look it up, Harvard implicit bias test. Check it out. It's like very well researched, and they have different topics that you can do an implicit bias test on. I'm mentioning this as an example. And there's 2 tests that I've done a few times now, which is one is about sexism and one is about racism, or at least about color. Each time I've come out every time as both a sexist and a racist. Now, am I actively somebody that's trying to be a sexist and racist? I hope not. At least if you don't know me yet, but I'm trying not to be. But what it is that I have an unconscious bias towards things. And if I can be honest with myself about it, I'm hoping that I can also make steps and help other people to be the same. So I feel our steps there is to be first honest with ourselves. And from there, I think we can take steps. I mean, we talk about indigenous philosophies, knowledge, and perspectives, but I realize that we just are sunk with so much bias already and programming that I first need to unlearn that, but I need to be honest with myself about it. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's
yes, it does. But I'm wondering, like, honest with ourselves in which aspect?
Well, honest to say, okay, I have a bias and I'd like to do something about it. And while I've learned about it, then I can also ask myself, what steps can I take?
Yes.
And not to just say, all right, now I know, that's it. No, I think that's a very passive approach. So if you even do the test and you're like, okay, good to know. Now say, no, okay, there's steps to take after that. Like I said, there's the supporting particular initiatives. There's partnering with indigenous communities. I'm not much of an activist myself, by the way. I do a lot of work in DEI. But during the pandemic, when the Black Lives Matter got erupted because of the murder of George Floyd, it was the first time that I was actually on the damn square, and I saw this group of people surrounded there. And by the way, a lot of people are much better activists than I am. I was joining because I was a bit nudged, like, I think you should join. I'm like, yeah, I think I should. And I was there, and for the first time I realized, so this is what the common voice feels like of people that are unheard. And a lot of people that only just watched it from the newspapers or saw a picture of it said, how could you? It was Corona, and all these people gathering, you brought people in danger. And I thought, nah, you missed the point there. The point was that there's something was so important that people are willing to put themselves in a situation to say, we need our voices to be heard. And I think that's where it was. And that also sparked something in me thinking, okay, voices need to be heard, and we need to be able to listen to them. So when I came to work the next day and I told them that I went, everybody had written me off and judged me, and they said, how could you, and how dare you in this time, where we're supposed to be protecting ourselves. Not one person asked me why I went. Not one person asked me why was it important to you. And I think that's where we can already make steps to say, hey, what's important to you? Just asking questions, being curious. I think that's where we can start.
That's beautifully said, Salman. Indeed, it starts from within, right? Like your conviction that something that you must do. And that sprang from the fact that you're aware that something's wrong is going on. Yeah, and yeah, that's good. And to also like sum up what Louis said, as like for the diversity, when you talk about diversity, it's really more about representation, right? Like everyone is represented in the society, and we really hope that these groups that are marginalized are represented. And when you talk about equity, that is really more about fairness, right? That we start at different levels, we have different resources, but when it comes to what is fair, then that is more about equity. So what you're saying is that we are striving for equity in society and not equality, because equality, I think, also is impossible. We cannot all be equal, right?
No.
I mean, but we can have equitable society, right?
Yeah, and if I just want to add one more thing, there's also maybe a more deeper topic, which is when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and this is mixing a little bit with indigenous, at least with philosophies, but there's one big one which is about intersectionality. For those that are at least familiar with that. Intersectionality is just a simple term of, say, for example, if you just split it up, man and woman, women generally are still at this, at this time and age, and even in the more Western civilized world, you'd say whatever civilized means, are still disadvantaged. Then you have, for example, that you're a woman and you're black. Okay, then there's even less advantages that you have. Then say, for example, you're a woman and black and you're gay, then there's even more. That's the intersectionality of different factors that play a role. And I think it's just important to realize when speaking to any communities, people or individuals, what is it that, what's their background, what is the intersectionality towards it, and what disadvantages are they maybe experiencing. And I think that already helps gain perspective. At least it helps me gain perspective every time I have a conversation thinking, oh, wow, okay. And you just take layers off layer off layer. So that comes back to equity as well. If we're creating equity in the world, are we looking at to what their needs are, what the needs are, needs are?
Yeah. Yes, and to finish off the diversity, equity, and inclusion is equal to, what do you think? If diversity is representation, equity is fairness, what about inclusion?
He's being nudged. I don't know why. Why was he being nudged?
We've had this conversation before about inclusion, that it's not the opposite of exclusion. The opposite of exclusion is belonging.
Yes.
And I think that inclusion is being invited to the party. I think inclusion is not, I think it should be about belonging. Belonging is about co-creation. And inclusion is about being included. It comes from a certain party. So I think the word you're looking for is that co-creating the party, whatever, who decided to do that in the first place, that is belonging.
Yeah, exactly. So inclusion.
John C. Powell, the Belonging and Other Institute in Berkeley.
Yeah, co-creation and belonging. Thank you. That's well explained. Now, before we move on to the Q&A, a last question that I would like to throw is, of course, we talk about DEI already, including recognizing and including indigenous knowledge in society, in our education, and any aspect of the world that we live in. But are there any challenges and opportunities that we see so far? So, for example, where is my... It's not working.
Try it again.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have identified the transferable indigenous knowledge, and now is the challenges and opportunities. When you think about that, are there potential challenges in recognizing and integrating indigenous knowledge into existing DEI initiatives when you talk about diversity and inclusion? But I think we already see it from the beginning of this discussion that no one knows about it and no one knows it exists. So that's already a big obstacle, right? When you don't know anything, then you wouldn't do anything. But maybe you have some other things you wanted to add pertaining to the challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, you know, with the work that I do, one of the challenges that I encounter is like a lot of resistance, right, in the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
It always starts with, okay, what is actually indigenous knowledge, right? Getting more awareness of about this topic. Before I joined here, I had thoughts about it, you know, because there's so not that much representation of indigenous people out there. You know, you have this, people, you know, you've seen the pictures from your family, your ancestors, and that's actually the image that I had. And the reason I came here as well is also to learn more about your community. And in the work that I do, and that's something that we talked about it before as well, like, hey, I'm not coming from this community and I don't want to speak in behalf of your community, right? And that's kind of like the challenge, that you don't talk about people, you talk with them. You have to include them also. They have their voice, they have their perspectives. Join them in, right? Let them feel that they belong, right? That they have a voice and that they can share with the rest of the people. But also, there's still a lot of things to do when it comes to DE&I work. You only have 24 hours in a day. And one of the things also like the budget, the timing that you have to allocate to work on these topics. So those are challenges that I encounter. But also, you know, what I said, like the resistance for people to change. At the VU, we have like defined 6 impact goals which we work on, and everything that we do has to contribute to one of those 6 impact goals. Also to bring some more focus on it, etc. But yeah, I always try, you know, to what I said, include others in this. It's the same what I did with my, what I'm still doing with the volunteer work I'm doing at Jobs for Humanity. We represent different communities, but actually all the volunteers who are also volunteering, they are actually all coming from these communities as well. And if I talk about these communities, it's also about the refugee community, people who are blind. They are actually sitting at the table and they give their insights on what kind of programs that we develop. And that's why I can't emphasize enough, like, don't talk about those people, but let them join and include them in all the, you know, different layers and decisions that you make.
Yes, and indeed, Louis pointed out that she's not from an indigenous community, but indeed I invited you to join us because of the same reason that also within the community of indigenous people, we are also kind of close. I mean, when we want to talk about something, we only also would like to talk about something within our groups. And there's a realization that if you want to to integrate in the society, at least you also go out there and kind of like participate. And like what I've said, community integration, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why, okay, I hope that this changes a lot of things when it comes to organizing events, you know, inviting speakers, that also like we kind of like integrate every stakeholders, whether you know about something and whether you not know about something, the most important thing is you are there and provide your input, because you're like a representative of the rest of the people who, or rest of the staff at any workplace, that, okay, I'm not indigenous, but I support your cause and I want to do something, I want to know more. So kind of like you represent that body of people, right? Same thing with Salman, I think. Well, I wonder, Cesar, if what do you think about the challenges? Do you think it's possible that we integrate the indigenous knowledge in today's society, especially now that we are in Europe? Any thoughts? Maybe challenges?
It's a tough question. But anyway, let me share some values which I think is useful when we try to construct a society based on justice. One is, I had an uncle, and then he practiced what we call pashit. In the whole community, if you are wealthy, you share your wealth to the whole community in such a way that there's no rich and there's no poor. In the pashit, my uncle sponsored 3 days butchering, dancing, and butchering animals, being given freely to the people, consuming rice wine and all of that. No? But what happened is it prevents the growth of a rich section of our community as against the poor. In other words, share your wealth. And then the other value that we have in terms of land is this. In the 70s, a World Bank project to dam the Chico River Dam, which will cause the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people and submergence of rice fields, thousands of hectares, was instituted. The people resisted. They built on the concept of the culture of resistance to defend their ancestral lands and tribal lands. And then one time, a government official went to him and said, hey, the name is MacLean. Hey, MacLean, do you have a title to your paper? Do you have a title to your land? And this is what he said, which expresses the concept of land ownership. He said, how can you speak of owning the land when instead we are owned by it? How can you own that which outlives you? Apo kabunyan, the land of us all, give us the land. It is sacred. This land nourishes our blood. You see, sharp contrast between the concept, the Hegelian concept of private ownership of land and that of the commonality and the relationship of the people to the land. Now, society is not static. Most of our societies, they develop what they call subsistence economy. And out of the subsistence economy comes out a culture that would care for the land, that gives them subsistence and all of that. But in the Cordillera, in the Philippines, and I suppose in Latin America and Africa, this subsistence economy is being replaced by what we call caste economy, where before you have rice terraces to share to all, now you convert your land to have caste into vegetable caste, and this creates a new value system for the people. You became competitive, and then you are thinking more profit-oriented. Sometimes I feel so sad when I go back to my barrio in Barrio Adaway. It is a rice culture. We produce rice, a nutritious rice, which we make us of rice, wine, etc. But because of the cash economy, and then the idea that it's good to have wealth and all of that, they convert these rice fields to vegetable cash crop. And once you sell your cash crop in the market, you became competitive. You see who will, you compete as to who will buy your product, and in order to buy your product, you may have to reduce it and all of that. And because of the idea that we produce for the market, there are quite a number of difficulties in terms of affecting community life. We became competitive. We don't care about our neighbor, and we acquire new value systems which negates the ancestral or traditional value system that we have. Now, in the Philippines, we say that we put into context the situation in the struggle of the indigenous people in the context of a Philippine society which is neo-colonial, semi-feudal, and ruled by bureaucrat capitalists. People who think of only in terms of corruption for their own interests. And some of our ancestral leaders are being caught up in this kind of a system. And some of them can become instruments against the interests of their own people. This is happening, and unfortunately it's happening. However, there is a trend also in the Philippines for various indigenous groups, very different in terms of history and location, etc., for them to come together, to organize themselves into alliances, indigenous youth and indigenous women, indigenous farmers coming together to talk of how they could defend their ancestral land and how they could move on being a part of a society or a movement to bring about justice in the Philippines. And our people are operating at the national and international level. And the fortunate thing about it is the role of indigenous women is taking shape, direction, and strength as they provide leadership in regional association of indigenous women, in regional association of farm workers, in regional association of indigenous youth and other sectors, including the LGTBs. So it's becoming more inclusive, and there's a necessity to be more inclusive given the fact that we are challenged to bring about a change in the whole of society to sustain our growth and to maintain our identity as indigenous people. And we are happy to say that indigenous people, indigenous women, mostly from the Cordillera that we came from, are providing leadership in international and regional associations. Asian Indigenous Peoples Pact is led by an Igorot woman. An Igorot woman was at one time the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations Committee for Indigenous People. And quite a number of them are taking leadership. It was an indigenous Igorot woman who founded the militant association of migrant workers, Benaisa Holland Gabriela. It was an indigenous woman. So the question of the role of women in the indigenous people's struggle in the Philippines is given recognition and appreciation. So we say, mabuhay, or long live the women.
Yes, thank you, Cesar. But on that note, Cesar, because we just... On that note, Cesar, thank you for pointing that out, because it reminded me, we just celebrated International Women's Day in March, but International Women's Day, we always talk about gender equality, right? Like the gender, women empowerment. But looking back from where we came from in our indigenous culture, we were raised without the notion of the difference between a boy and a girl, or a woman and a man. We are all equal, right? But I think that all changes when we were colonized and we were taught, oh, women are this, they are in a low level, and men are that. So that changes totally, and that I was reminded by that, because in our culture, there's no such thing as gender inequality, because both men are equal until the colonials came and changes everything in the value system that we have. So moving forward, I hope that changes. Yeah.
There's one more contemporary situation that is confronting our indigenous people communities in the Philippines, and I suppose in other regions of the world, the whole question of political repression. Our people are rising up. For example, MacLean was killed for standing against this World Bank development thing. He was murdered together with indigenous people. And now the situation in the Philippines is a little bit scary. Indigenous people, human rights fighters, those who are advocating for our ancestral lands are tagged as terrorists.
Yeah.
And once you are tagged as a terrorist, you are subjected to imprisonment, disappearance, as it happened recently to some indigenous people, killings and imprisonment. This is the situation that we are in. And unfortunately, the European Union declared a revolutionary force in the Philippines to be terrorists, which was the basis for the anti-terrorism law, which is used against anyone who tried to stand up for the rights of the people, to fight for justice and all of that. This is the situation that we are in. And we are happy that quite a number of European groups, as well as here in Netherlands, are finding ways to express solidarity with our people who are caught up in this situation. And that gives us hope because, as what we said, we're receiving solidarity, not only at our point of weakness and suffering, but we are receiving solidarity at our point of struggle for justice, peace, and to assert our indigenous people's right. And so we say again, salamat. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all. So that ends our discussion on the challenges and opportunities that we face up to this moment. The battle is not finished. It's just beginning, I think. So this opens any question from the audience. If you have any comments, reaction, Max will be passing the mic. Yeah. You can mention your name and your question. Yes.
You're just gonna, okay. Hello, my name is Gian Hernandez. I am an assistant professor of intercultural communication at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And my question deals with the dichotomy between ownership and appropriation. So I meant you all kind of eloquently mentioned this idea of ownership and how we can, as indigenous people, speak to certain knowledges and who is spoken for and who is spoken against. And I'm curious, I have a lot of thoughts myself, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how members of the global majority, for example, indigenous communities that belong to Latin America, for example, or Africa, how they can leverage sort of these knowledges, right? Is it, in your opinion, appropriate for this to take place, or do we have to sort of draw boundaries around who gets to speak about what kinds of knowledges?
Does anyone want to?
I don't know. Yeah, seems like a particularly bigger topic, but so I've got this example that it was a few months ago. There was somebody that came to teach the Maori haka to a group, and he came in, white guy, and I'm like, sorry, what's happening here? And then this was the interesting part. He said, I'm going to tell you why I can teach you the Maori haka. I can only teach you one part because apparently there's 30 different derivatives, there's different versions of it. And he said, I had to shadow and be a part of the community and go through an entire process. And he just labeled out why at this point, after many, many years and being given the permission and having people from the Maori community join him while he gives these sessions, saying this is why I can teach you this. And the reason why and the background behind it. Now I use that as an example because I thought everyone can watch the YouTube video of the New Zealand team doing the haka, and it's very impressive, and just copy it and act like, But when he brought the history and he brought his journey about why he's the one that can also speak on it and why he had to go through all those different trials to do so, it made me feel like I think that's where that kind of ownership and what you said was appropriation kind of comes together. If it's done with permission, if it's done with accordance, if it's done with some form of, I would say, connecting with the origin of where it comes from, then I feel like it has a different, then the messaging comes from the right place. A lot of these, let's say, ancient wisdoms or indigenous wisdoms have been passed on people to people to people to people. And I feel like if we're able to do that respectfully, always talking about what the origin is, then then we can also learn about that too. But if I hear about someone, and I don't want to belittle things like yoga practices and stuff, but if you're just doing the yoga practice without the real thought, what's behind it and where it comes from and the origin, I feel that's when a kind of form of appropriation happens. I'm not saying that all practices of yoga are like that. I'm just using that as an example. And I think that's where we kind of mix it up, and that's when I think appropriation takes place much more than, us taking the time and energy to actually look at the origin.
I totally agree with Salman, and I think what you're saying is more like acknowledging where the source of the knowledge come from. But when it comes to where do you draw the line between ownership and appropriation, I think first and foremost, of course, it's awareness, but also cultural sensitivity, which we lack the most. Of course, there are cultures that we find like, okay, it's okay with the rest, but then for the collectivist society, it's okay, or for the individualist society, it's not okay, or you are, what do you call that? I'm offended. Like there are behaviors that are offensive and there are not. So I think what really matters is like understanding, knowing, but how do we know these things if we don't have access to this knowledge, or we don't even have access to a space to talk about this thing, like what is not appropriate and what is not, right? And what is offensive and what is not. So I think it all starts once again from within. Who draws the line? We don't know. But again, going back to respect, at least respect and know what is offensive to others and what is not for others. And also for some, even for us indigenous people, like nowadays, we have this cultural attire. What June and Mercedes are wearing, their original attires. But now we have these fashion shows, and then they make use of these hand-woven attires. A long time ago, it was sacred. It was supposed to be. Now they use this textile to put on a bikini and make up this kind of clothes that are for fashion and say, oh, this is ethnic and that. But that is no longer respectful of what it used to be. So this kind of things, even within the indigenous community, is happening. So who decides and what? I think, it's all within. Yeah.
If I can add one thing to it, because I did some research as well for certain examples. I know that maybe you've seen it in the media as well, but I think 3 months back, Ralph Lauren, they also made this design or a whole campaign. It's actually also went on the news from CNN. You can look it up. There's also video involved. I think it takes around 6 minutes. But it explains very well that the people from that community, they were involved in front of the camera, behind the camera. They were used in the pictures as well. I think if the intentions are really good and they are there with a lot of respect showing, with the whole process, I think that's appropriate, right? Because if you look at the fashion, what you just said, Myra, there's a lot of things, putting out, grabbing out of the perspectives and putting it on as a bikini. Yeah, it's disrespectful, of course. But I think that is a really good example. Just look it up and have a look at the video. I think that's really, nice to see how well they have done it.
I hope that answers your question, Furu. Okay, thank you.
May I just add one point? I think the question of cultural appropriation, in the Philippines, tourism is a necessary industry. And there's a tendency for the tourist industry to dictate the terms on how culture is done. In the Philippines or in the culture tribe, we have dances appropriate to the seasons of agricultural life and all of that, celebration, etc., etc. But because of the coming of tourism, at any given time, hey, a tourist is coming, or a busload of European tourists is coming, and they give much income to the country. Could you do these dances here? Yeah. To the point that no less than at one time the president of the Philippines, this woman president, Gloria, he said, hey, the people of Ifugao, the famous terrace buildings, they were shifting from Kogon huts made out of grass. They were already changing it with GI sheets because they found it useful, long-lasting, cheaper as compared to that. And then this president said, hey, you should stop changing your house formation and rooftop. Go back to
the old style.
Brazilian rooftop because it's what the tourists would like.
Yeah.
You see, so that, and well, tourism is an
It's
industry,
one factor,
and it is raising several questions about how it deals with the question of the culture of the people. There's a big issue now in the Philippines about it.
Yeah, that goes back to what we are talking about, like systemic, systemic injustices, systemic wrongs that is done towards us. What we can do, we try to do. Yeah.
I have some issues. We talked about the oppression of indigenous culture, people, land, and knowledge. And then we talked about diversity, inclusion, and equity. When the indigenous people, I mostly stay within Canada, are not looking at D&I for a vehicle for transformation, because inclusion is including them into the nation state that robbed their land. So the hashtag of indigenous people there is like land back.
Yeah.
And that's never going to happen within that system. So the agenda is decolonization, indigenizing, and unsettling. So on a university level, then you have facilitated sessions of unsettling, which is really making visible what has been unvisibilized all along of the structure of violence.
Yeah.
And then decolonization, which really requires to undo the issue of systemic theft, because there is so much legal theft within the nation state. If you look at the UN and climate summits, they can include indigenous people to talk for 5 minutes in a song, a poetry about the loss of their land, but they don't recognize their people, because on the atlas, 5,000 indigenous people are not on the atlas. They are systemically erased, and that's in the UN. They don't have representation because they're not a nation state. And these 90 countries that have recognized indigenous people, they are still the ones who get to recognize that they even exist or not. In so many countries, there are unrecognized indigenous people because the nation state doesn't want to recognize them. So I wanted to move the needle a little bit, like to not think of doing a heart transplantation with a teaspoon. Like you actually need a sharp knife to make that system change, because under colonial capitalism, including indigenous people still leads to their genocide. It leads to their erasure, their theft, their cultural theft.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to shift that conversation a little bit in the recognition that inclusion leads us away from the agenda of stopping the colonial structure from advancing.
Yes, that's really a deep analysis that you made on that, but it is true, right? The question I have to pose now is, why are these concepts, the topic of decolonization, not included in the DEI initiative? So the other way around, right? Like, why are we not, or why don't we bring this together? Because the thing that I also notice nowadays with DEI initiative is like, it's just to be politically correct, right? It's not really like genuine, which we hope it should be genuine, as you have mentioned. But yeah, so the question now I have is, why are they not integrated in DEI or DEI in the colonization? But this is
the question is, like, can we shift from the agenda of diversity and inclusion to decolonization and unsettling?
Definitely. For me, I don't know what about you, but I could give
I
the...
know that the VU has been working on decolonization as well. My former colleague, but he just left the VU. He's currently working at gemeente Amsterdam. So he's been really working on this topic. I'm not the only one from the diversity office. We consist of 8 people at the moment, and his focus is really on the decolonization part. But I can't really give you all the insights because that knowledge was with him. I'm more on the HR part. But yeah, we're working on it. Yeah.
I have to say, I mean, thank you, by the way, for mentioning what you just did, because you're talking about the people that you're actually in contact with, that you've been able to experience what they're going through, the legal theft, the fact that the UN doesn't even recognize them. These are all things that when you're saying them, I'm like, holy shit, that's terrible, horrible, and I can't still believe that's happening. And then the kind of interesting that they're invited to a climate summit and then they're just able to share their voice, but actually there's no actual impact. I've worked with a couple of NGOs, and just for the sake of it, won't mention their names now in this particular setting, but working within healthcare setting. And what I noticed was that they're also trying to decolonize themselves from the inside out. And what I've noticed about that topic generally is it's a fickle thing because it's so systemic and it's so stuck into the way an entire organization, or even like you just said, colonial capitalism has been built. And that's when it's like you literally pull on one thread and the whole system's shaking. That it doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to work on it. We really have to continue to, I would say, you said, use a knife instead of a teaspoon. I would even say perhaps a sledgehammer might be even good at this particular point. I mean, carefully though, because there's so much, for a heart transplant maybe different. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. Let's do something to save the patient, and then just a scalpel would be good. But what I do see there is that we don't give that attention because we're still trying to focus on the day-to-day. So what I mean by that is I hear you, and I know that that's a topic that needs attention. When I look at, like, for example, teams, organizations, or companies, or NGOs that I work with, I just start with where they are. Because if I start talking about decolonization and somebody's just like, but we are inclusive here, and I look around me and I'm like, yeah, okay. Where do I start this conversation? Do you understand what I mean? I need to see where the starting point is. So it's all there. It all needs attention, but it's also about how to get people to a certain point that they can even understand decolonization is the topic that we need to address. If that makes any sense, what I just said.
I work in this as well. It's just that while these slow processes take place, other people are dying.
Yeah,
and it's also the implicit racism that the death of others is cheaper than the understanding of white fragility within NGOs, museums. I've worked with different festivals.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Maybe we get a last question or comment. Yeah.
My name is Loes. I have a UNESCO chair in Futures Literacy at Hanze University of Applied Sciences. I think I was supposed to say that. My question is a little bit about the systemic level, and I think a lot that we can do if we're talking about belonging in co-creation, that we can make a lot of changes. I think in the way we do things, because a lot of the language here is about goals, incorporation, integration. A lot of the language is very corporate in itself, and I was wondering if you ever maybe thought about doing this session a little bit differently, instead of looking at 4 experts on a panel with a PowerPoint. I mean, if we're, I think that's the incorporation, integration, maybe it's not so much about the initiatives that are, or people being invited, about really changing in how we can do things differently together. Yeah. So things are always shifting, always fading, changing, I was just wondering if you consider that.
May I? Yeah, definitely. From my perspective, that's a way to go, and I hope that it is the way to go, not only for us from our part, but also for people who are here in your own capacity. But yeah, moving forward, indeed, this is just a start. Like, we open the discussion and we see whether there's an interest, and how do you see the integration of indigenous knowledge in today's society, in today's high-tech society, if that is something. And it's good to see the interest. And if there's an interest among you guys, or among you, among everyone, then the conversation moves deeper in a way that is more like a sharing and collaborative efforts of probably workshops and things like that. Maybe in your own institutions even. That would be great. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you. And I think because we're running out of time, but we are on time, that ends our Q&A, unless there are others. Once again, thank you, Louis, Cesar, Cesar Taguba, thank you. And Salman, thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you all for being here tonight, but please don't go. We have to form a circle to have our ceremonial closing. So we would like to share with you the spirituality part of indigenous culture, and that is to feel our interconnectedness with one another in the form of a dance, in a circular formation. So maybe invite everyone to stand up and then form a circle as we end this session.
No, Bindian.
Yes. First, we form a circle, and then I will explain what follows next. No one is going to the toilet. just kidding. Maybe we involve everyone at the back. Yeah. We form a big circle. And we can make a space at the back so we have a place to run around. Yeah. We just make a circle.
That's quite...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and then... I borrow the mic.
Test.
So as our form of gratitude for your time, we would like to share with you this, let's say a ritual, a closing ritual. We, in an indigenous community, circular always means community. We hold each other's hands, means to say we are there for each other to support one another. So for this dance, it is a song in a circular movement, and in the indigenous community, of course, having a leader is very important. But important to also trust the leader in a community, because if you don't trust the leader, then everything is chaotic, right? So in the same way, in our dance, you have to follow the leader. Yeah. So whatever the leader does, you do. So when the leader raises up her hands like this, you do the same. When she does like this, you do the same. When she does like this, you do the same. Yeah. So when she falls down, you carry her up. Yes. Okay. So this one is also kind of like a dance until you get tired. So also, we have this jumping of the feet. That means to say you have to really put all your, we jump our feet, we jump our feet. That is to get rid of all the negativity in us, okay? So, when you do the hands, you can follow me. Usually, like what June said, when you do like this, you can just do the same way I do. It's just reverence to Mother Earth. You look down. And then reverence to the heavens. And when you do this, you just make a sound to get rid of the evil spirits and things like that. Yeah, so you have to do as hard as you can. Yeah, so you jog off all the negativity. Okay, for now, I will be the one to lead, so you just follow the steps I do. If I go around, we all go around. Yes. Okay. Music, maestro. You can make it louder.
Thank you. So are you all tired? So that ends our session today, and thank you so much. You're expert dancers now. But if you would like, we would like to invite everyone, if we could have a group photo on the stage. If you come on stage for a group photo, we have your permission. So yeah, do come. We can put some chairs so some of our elders can sit. And then at the back, some people, right? It's dance until you get tired. You can help me. Just so some people can sit down and some people on the, yeah. Yeah, I think that is enough. Jessie? Okay, yes. So, yeah, now we are broadcasted. Now it's gonna be off, yes, now it's good. Okay, can we join the group picture? The seats are here.
I thought this part was...